Hi, Shirley here, and today it's one of those Spirit of Matter episodes where I just open up a camera and I speak about whatever. So, what's going to be here is not a well-cooked scientific paradigm that is well tested, but random thoughts and invitations for you to educate me if you know more about the topics that I'm mentioning, to go look for stuff yourself. And to have a nice discourse that's respectful. Sometimes I just love to record my thoughts and share them without that having any, concrete responsibility as to how validated the things are. It's just thoughts, and they have their own value. So today's thoughts. Let's pick an oil. I want an oil for this. My blend that is about to be finished. Yeah. This one helps to return to my own energy. In the last couple of, weeks, I've had a lot of energy, vital energy. Even a couple of days before I switched to my Mars perfection year, there was a lot of energy building up. And I was happy because during my Saturn years, I was so sick. I had chronic fatigue. I could hardly walk. But then when you go to these vital energies, and I didn't believe I could be this vital again, and to walk again, and to work out and to do whatever I want with my body, then you have to pay attention to the other aspect, that is not to get too electric. And that's really good with the oils. They make you talk about whatever, and then that just eases you out into the topic that is electricity and the nervous system. So yeah, the way I use oils is to sort of balance the electricity in my nervous system, so I can feel energetic still, but also be able to hold stillness. I'll use also elemi oil. I really like it. Elemi and sandalwood. That's something that I do that I don't do to my clients. To my clients, I always use it as a blend. But for aromatherapist, every once in a while we can do it like that. We don't have to pay all that much attention. Just make sure that we're not doing it every day so that our skin won't suffer. You have to blend it with carrier oil, so that you so that you can absorb the oil better into your body and not damage the skin. So let's ask for a miracle. These two, elemi and sandalwood. Sandalwood is, oh wow, I love the smell. It's a tree that's actually supported by other trees. It actually takes the water from the trees around it, and we always use it for people with autoimmune diseases, unless they're treated with steroids, of course, and skin problems. Because with autoimmune disease, people may have the sense that the environment is something scary and threatening because they have autoimmune disease or even allergies, certain allergies. And the energy signature of the oil is basically an oil that is nourished by its surroundings, that is completely safe in its surroundings. It always has enough water. It grows, it's a beautiful big tree that is nourished by its surrounding. And having the energy signature of that, the energy frequency of that inside the body is very helpful for people who cope with feeling that the environment is scary. And sandalwood is also a miracle oil. So whenever you want a miracle in your life to happen, it's a very good thing to sniff this oil. It's very grounding, and it's grounding in a tender way. So whenever I want to feel connected and nourished by my surrounding and have miracles in my life, I sniff the sandalwood. And Elemi is about the yin-yang balance. It's a hermetic oil in that sense, you know, the above and below, within and without, the yin and yang, the darkness and the light, an inner peace. So I just love it. It's, yeah, I think it's a Jupiterian oil, one of the Jupiterians, like frankincense and myrrh. And so I ask to return to my own energy and feel my own energy, nourished in my own energy. Which is interesting that I didn't even think about the combination, because sandalwood is being nourished by our surroundings. And here it's about inner peace. It's about being nourished by our own energy. So it's a good balance between me and society. I just felt like doing both, and I didn't even think of, you know, why am I doing that? So that's nice to see. And we do have this the ability to hold the contradiction of being one and being separate. And the ability to hold this contradiction within at ease and at peace, it sort of balances the electric currents around us. I did not imagine that I would address this from a spiritual perspective. I was actually going to address this from physics perspective. But look, the unimaginable happens. And that's a big insight. And from a spiritual perspective, the ability to hold the contradiction that we are both one and individuals gives us inner peace and allows for the electricity and the electric current in our bodies to run in a balanced way, because this is a yin-yang balance. Okay, yang, it can separate, it's compartmentalized, it's clear, it has clear boundaries. Yin is more diffusive within the environment, and when we can hold these two together, then we're actually balanced. Mentally, spiritually, psychically. And as you can see, this is not an easy combination to hold together. And the yin-yang balance actually brings me, you know, there is whenever somebody says yin-yang and people take it to masculine, feminine, they get triggered. And so I have a friend and colleague who is, aside of being a holistic healer, she's also a tantra teacher. And she brought to our country, to Israel, the discourse of linear and cyclic energy. This is very much relating to the numbers, to the episode, I think it was the second episode of Spirit of Matter that I did about the numbers and yin-yang. because when you look at it from a geometrical point of view, through 2 points there is only one line that can cross, and that is yang energy. So 2 is actually a yang number. Well, through 3 points you can already have a circle, and this is cyclic energy, and so 3 is actually a yin number. Although the Chinese would do it in the opposite way, where 2 would be yin, and maybe the line would be yang, and 3 would be yang, and maybe the circle would be yin, which is also great. It had worked for them. But I always like to, if I come up with an idea and it's a bit different, I always like to see what can it do for the world, what are its explanatory powers, how does the world change when we look at it from a different point of view. This is not to negate any other point of view, but to add a voice to the discourse that we can play with. The other day, me and my best friend were thinking about our past and the things I did in the past Mars perfection year that were activism and so on. I actually thought about activism and feminism, which seems completely unrelated to the nervous system, but it is. People have this misconstrued idea that feminist activists are actually women who did not get along well in society and do not have friends who are men and do not like men and so on, that even if what they're doing is correct and right, they're sort of like this outsider in society and so on and so forth. And I just noticed that both myself and my friends who are very potent activists, people who did historical stuff for my country, they, during the metoo era, the pre-metoo era, we were the pre-metoo era, we didn't know we were bringing the metoo, but all of us had important male figures to support us, alive or dead. 2 of them, one that I was not in such a good contact with, had her father. One very good friend of mine always relied on her father, and both these fathers were dead. But that was like the solid figure of a man in her life that gave her the power to believe that she's capable and potent. And for me, I had my best friend. We wrote the satire together, and he was a point of, an anchor point of support and nourishment for me. And I realized how it's all related to the yin-yang thing, because true, yin-yang is nothing to do with gender. It's cyclic and linear energy. It can exist within the own person. But yes, on a grander level, when someone, when a woman plays the yang outside the society, there's a very nourishing man, or, perhaps with people who are genderqueer, this probably works differently. But I'm speaking about, heteronormative stuff, then there's always a nourishing man that really helps her out and backs her up. Even for the lawyer who helps my friend with litigation. So that lawyer is a big activist in my country, and her husband really backs her up. He really takes care of all the little things that she cannot take care of, and supports and nourishes her. So just like you say, whenever you see a potent man, a potent leader doing great change in the world, being a great inspiration, and you see there is always a woman supporting and nourishing him in the background, and sometimes not in the background. Sometimes they're just partners doing their own thing, but they nourish each other. It's the same with the women that you see doing similar things. So it's not the women that do not get along in society so well, but they're actually nourished. And in this way, the very act of bringing yin into society, bringing acknowledgement of women, bringing acknowledgement of equality of men and women, and then also other genders. There's men, there's women, and then there's also other gender. It expands. It's equality of all people. That was humanism, and then there was feminism, and now it's gender equality. So all these cycles, they were starting from men, they were starting from yang. I guess it's because of the nature of yang energy. It breaks, it is initiative. It sets boundaries, And so it makes sense that the yang energy will break free first and then bring the others with it. And then people would embody healthy yang within them. So it kind of makes sense if I try to think at nature from a point of view of energy and not from a point of view of, oh, there was patriarchy, matriarchy. I'm trying to think why in terms of energy, why these waves, why not other ways, why not women first, why not trans people first, and then, so I guess that yang energy is so condensed that it creates boundaries and isolates itself, and then other people can embody yang in some way. But we're not separable. It's actually a part of the cycle of good balance. And when this balance happens in a correct way, then people are easily able to embody the new energy and manifest it in their lives. When it doesn't happen, then we have huge yin-yang imbalance. The great example is the Second World War, because there were 2 generations of men killed, and then women had to work, and so they when they already were independent, because they had to, they needed to vote, because they needed, it mattered to them much more than to go out and unite together and have pro-women rights demonstrations in the street pre the world wars. It doesn't mean that there weren't any such events, but at the time where it was already something that they were doing for a living, they were the citizens, the working citizens, the people who had the businesses, the people who had the responsibility. So it mattered to them more. If you own a business and the government puts a law that puts you down, you will go and protest because it touches you. It's no longer the business of the husband or the business of the company or whatever. And that it was excess yang. It was like excess yang, and then yin could no longer nourish yang, and so it crashed down. And then there was excess yin. Eventually there was balance, but this balance came through a world war. So women got the right to vote after 2 generations of men got killed. We definitely don't want to make changes that way. And remember in 2017, when I was writing my satire about the pre-MeToo era, and the MeToo came, I said that what we have is not the chance to make a change. It's the chance to make a change in the way we make a change. What we have is the possibility to accept the voices that we hear, to listen, to heal, to speak out, and to do something different. And in 2020, when the coronavirus came and all the academia was shut and everybody taught only through Zoom, I could not help but think about how it is nearly impossible to sexually harass the student now. It is nearly impossible to do something because it's recorded. And we actually had a case of a lecturer who was recorded. He thought he was telling a funny joke, and that joke was sexist, and he got slapped for it. So I don't know if it doesn't necessarily mean that he stopped working, but they could tell him, look, this is not something you can do. You have to account for your words. So something really big changed there, and the structure changed. Especially people who did not always have all the technological skills to do what they do, and people who relied on being this charismatic character that stands in front of the audience and mesmerizes people. That had to change. Now they were, like me, in the screen, and that's the most that they could do. That's the most that they could impress. That's the most that they could come up with. And the dog would come. The dog would come to the room. The children would come to the room. You have to take care that the room is not too messy. Mine is messy. I don't care. Something beautiful changed in the structure of academia, and something beautiful changed in the structure of that hierarchy. something disintegrated. Unfortunately, it took Corona for that, and I don't know how much how much of it will last. But I believe a lot. Also in the workforce, a lot of people are no longer willing to not work from home. Like they got used to work from home. They're no longer willing to be, chained in another structure with the institution and bosses and whatever. They've gotten used to something different. So the structure, the Corona was a structural change. It was Saturn in Capricorn, and moving to Saturn in Aquarius. So the change of structure and creating of a new structure and formation of a new structure. And from a metoo perspective, this is blessed. Of course, there were other implications like domestic violence. Yes, that's not downplaying that. But I can't help but thinking that we've gotten to a place that's so much better in many respects for people, not just for women, for people, because men too were sexually harassed by gender female professors. Those were also study cases. So I guess that the connection is sanity. And it really is, we really have the chance to make peace inside ourselves between our energies. I did not expect this to become this political. I just wanted to talk about electricity and the nervous system. What happened? Okay, it is political. So electricity and the nervous system. One of the reasons that I always tell, as aromatherapists, we tell our clients to drink a lot of water is, well, water is life. And I also my mouth is getting a bit dry for the oils. They dry up the body. But water also allows for electricity current to flow through them. And the more water we have in our bodies, the more free the electricity can be. The objective of sniffing an oil is to spark more sparks of electric activity in the nervous system. It's actually being able to, if I think about having a brain where you have a couple of parts that are always activated, and then there is density in the energy, to kind of spreading it out. This is what calms you down. You're calmed down not because your nervous system is less active, but it is active in a way that is more balanced. For example, when you have stress, right, then certain actions for your body, digestion is interfered, and the eyes, the vision is interfered. Certain stuff that are less urgent are interfered, so that the energy is more condensed. It's the same electric current but more condensed. And then when you can calm down, then if your system is healthy, then it signals that the whole body can act as one again. You don't have to be concentrated on certain areas and give certain areas the greater meaning, so you would neglect other areas. And that's what we want to do with the nervous system. We want to harmonize it. We want to spread out the electricity so it won't be like, a lightning in one place. Because electric current is a lightning. In astrology, we talk about Mercury as relating to the nervous system, and its higher octave Uranus also relates to electricity in the air. For example, lightnings, storms. It's a very Uranian thing. Another thing about electricity, when a person has, a heart attack, what do? We arouse the entire system with electric shock. it boosts up the energy, and then the person can return to life, and the heart can return to its own pulse, which is fascinating. This shock actually brings the person back to life. You can think of this shock as very Uranian. It's a shock to the system that it actually means to liberate it and to allow it to flow. Okay, we're getting to the topic of this discussion after this long foreplay. Also in the brain, for people who have extreme mental difficulties or depression, then they get treated with electricity to arouse the whole brain, and there are implications to that. But for some people, that's the only thing that helps them, because suddenly there is activity there. Suddenly there is activity where there wasn't. And so after a couple of sessions, something becomes activated that wasn't activated previously, and it can save lives. Although it's not an easy treatment in any way, shape, or form. But again, we see this electric current that is sudden, that is shock, causing not trauma to the body, but actually liberating the body from trauma. Although we know, shock, something that is shocking, something that is electric, can also be something traumatizing. On a mundane level, we see that Uranus is this shock, and it can liberate people from their physical bodies. We now have this Saturn square Uranus up in the heavens, going on and off. When I looked at Kaisler's chart, I saw Saturn in conjunct Uranus in his natal chart, and he would be born into 2 world wars, into the Second World War, I think, already. I'm not implying anything. No, I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying that this is something that creates a shock that liberates the system. It's something that was, if I take a look cosmically, why do we have this arrangement in the heavens and not other arrangement? Some things need to be shaken away. Some structures, some Saturnian structures need to be shaken away, and Uranus allows for that. But there is also something else we need to remember. Uranus can also denote as natural disasters. And when we think about natural disasters, let's talk about, let's say, earthquake or volcanoes. From the vantage point of the Earth, it just gets rid of excess energy. It happens quickly and fast. It's like the ground farts, and then it's over. But from the vantage point of us human, it's different. Why is it different? It's different because of temperature. Our temperature is 36, 37 Celsius. I don't know how much is it in Fahrenheit. That's the degrees we feel comfortable in. We usually go by 25 Celsius degrees of the room temperature. And in the summer, we want it lower even when we turn on the air condition, like mine right now. There are the temperatures that nourish our life. In terms of astrology, the planet most related to that is Jupiter, right? It's warm, and it's humid, it's wet, moist. And this is also the temperature of life inside us. So, moon, the womb, Venus also, human connections, a connection between human people. And that is, we can only go so much into heat or into coolness, into dryness or into wetness before we lose it. If it's too wet outside, then we won't be able to breathe properly. If it is too dry outside, then we will have electric current. We will feel electricity in the air. and there can be burnings of fields, of forests, because it doesn't nourish life. And so we are much more susceptible to be liberated from our bodies, from our physical bodies, from life on this planet, through natural disasters than, for example, mountains or rocks that are Saturnian stuff, you know, cold and dry. And so what we consider natural disasters for the cosmos is just you know, a release of energy. You know, you release something so you can move on. On a political level, wars are pretty much the same. I can really talk about the mini war that was here in, you know, in the beginning of May. One sudden day, people clashed in the streets, rockets were falling for 11 days. Energy was released, and then new government, strange government, interesting government. It's like you put so many people from such different perspectives in the government, not just in the parliament, in the government, that I'm really curious as to what's going to be and how is it going to work. But there was this huge shake, you know, this huge release of energy. Some people died. Some people got trauma for the rest of their lives. But from the vantage point of the, you know, the more global, some energy was released, and then the government changed. It is not changed yet. There's still like, but it's like, and now, okay, it's peaceful until the next time. Like, I know people talk about I think mid-July or the beginning of July, where Mars enters Leo and T-squares the Saturn Uranus square, and people talk about it as something that can reignite some fires. Let's hope not. But that's stuff that happened on a mundane level, and so a lot of these things are just things that happen, and nobody's necessary to blame for them if that's the arrangement of the planets. But then we also have some choice as to our actions. Yeah, I wonder what else did I want to speak about. Well, there are things I cannot speak about, like weather, like research on weather or research on earthquake, because it's actually stuff that I cannot expose here. But in general, you know, before a natural disaster that is of uranian nature, it is actually an Aquarian nature, and you would have the cool down of Saturn, and then the disruption of Uranus. If I think about an explosion, explosions. Let's talk about explosions. You know, the uranian explosion is that way. You know, you have a shock. You can have pre-shocks. You can have aftershocks. It's sudden. It's quick. It's gone. It's permanently changed, and it comes from uneven temperatures. It's think about a lightning. It's the pressure in the air that's uneven, the temperatures in the air that's uneven. Then you have a lightning, and a lightning strikes, and thunderstorm. That's, you know, sound, and those things are sudden. They're uranian in nature. But think about a nuclear bomb. It's something that heats and heats and heats and heats and heats and heats and heats to explosion. Right? How do you explode something, you know, nuclear? So the explosion comes from excess speed, that comes from excess heat until it reaches a threshold. This is as far as I know. Correct me if I'm mistaken as to nuclear explosions. And that is also something that's a bit slower, because kind of like until it reaches the threshold, there's the whole process there, a whole momentum that is gained, in a way that is, I think, more linear, because it's like, you know, if you think about Saturn, the cool down, and Uranus, the something unnerving that happens. I think about Mars and Pluto, it's like kind of a scorpionic thingy. So Mars is heat, so it heats up, heats up, heats up, heats up. It gets faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and then it explodes. That's the Pluto thingy. That's the explosion, the nuclei that, you know, spreads. And they have different effects. For example, right now, over, I think, 100 years after certain A-bomb explosions, you know, we still have radiation in Chernobyl. We probably still have some radiation in Japan. So the radiation is still there. Unlike the uranian shock, where, you know, something changed permanently, and then perhaps the implications will take a lot of time to process and to heal and to rearrange the system. But with the nuclei, with Pluto, it's kind of like the energy is still the energy is still left for 100 years. So it's like it's not over. The explosion, it's like it's not over, because the energy is still there. The radiation is still there. The disaster has not ended yet. So that's a difference between, you know, uranian and plutonian stuff. And of course, you know, Pluto-Mars, it immediately takes me to certain types of violence, where the energy remains within, you know, if you talk about the victim-perpetrator relationships, the energy remains within the body and has to be released, and it takes time. That's why it can take so much time to heal from trauma. I don't like that. Sneezed on that. So it became a much darker spirit of matter episode that I had intended. I was just like, oh, let's talk about electricity and the nervous system, and the Second World War, and healing from violence, and so on and so forth. But I'll just air it as I always do with these things, because I never know why is it coming out, who has to see it now, or I don't know when. I have thoughts concerning my next episode, because I kind of ran into interesting topics. By the way, this whole episode of electricity and stuff is it's inspired by a joke about moisture, and then that joke took, like, yeah, it was a joke in the astrology cast about water stuff, water sports or whatever, and then me and another viewer had a conversation when she said, oh, you should watch this video about the whole year horoscope, and I'm like, look what you've done, I will have to watch it, because that's where the jokes began. And then I saw the Saturn Uranus thingy, and discussions about the weather, or what's going on up in the weather, and all of my, you know, chaos theory, electricity, humidity and electricity, and all this stuff came into my mind, and I began to see a couple of synchronicities to do with moisture jokes. So sometimes you get guides like that, you know, these sorts of guides to tell you stuff, and yeah, and that's how it came about. But it ended up so dark. I don't know why. Okay. And so yeah, shout out to the cast. And I have another episode of Spirit of Matter that I don't know if I want to do it, because I don't know. Okay, it is about Jung and Sabina, Carl Jung and Sabina Spielerein. Called her Frankenstein. I don't know why. It sounds funny, but she's Sabina Spielerein, and she's actually the first psychoanalyst, the first woman psychoanalyst. She had an affair with Jung, and there were hypnosis involved, and there were psychosis involved, and there were models, therapeutic models of dealing with the content of psychotic seizures in a way that reminds me of the open dialogue approach. So it's a big episodes, and it's also, you know, relating to the World War and how they I think they kind of thought they are healing collective unconsciousness, and that will manifest in a better world. And then there was a Second World War. So it's a heavy episode, but the reason I'm not sure about how to do that, because she brings Neptune to my fourth. I don't remember where his Neptune is, but I can feel Neptunian energies, and Neptunian energies are very delusional. And so I might not be able to observe what's going on there in a way that is comprehensive. And this would turn into an episode about observation and the observation bias. So that's an interesting one. It's also, it began as something that I ran into in my life, and certain theories about death and life and sexuality as a gate of dated life that Sabina bought were actually ascribed to Jung and Freud. And then she came up with countertransference, which I hated the talk because I don't believe there is countertransference. I believe there is transference, and it can begin with the patient or begin with the therapist. But then I was just watching, I always return to the planets, houses, signs series of the cast, because they tell it so accurately. And they were talking about Jung, and they were talking about him doing the axis of Leo, Aquarius, and therefore he came with collective unconsciousness as archetypes and something, and myths, and not, for example, like Freud, who came with sexuality and libido, and that seemed to me like but we ascribe the life and death thingy and the sexuality as this gate of life, of destruction and rebuilding something, to Jung, while it was actually Sabina. So I found her chart. I didn't find her ascendant, so I don't have the houses, which is annoying for me. His houses are there. And I thought it's going to be simple. I'm just going to show that, look at the chart of Jung. He's, he was doing archetypes while she was doing something else. And you can naturally see that these ideas came from her chart and not from his chart. But then he had Pluto in Taurus, which activates the axis of the Taurus Scorpio. And she would come with her stellium in Scorpio. That she did have a stellium in Scorpio, as I predicted. But she would come with her stellium in Scorpio, activating his Pluto. And so he would be very much accepting of her waters. And what happens when you unite with someone on that level? They slept together, probably physically, if Pluto in Taurus is a very physical sign. And so what happens when you unite energies in this way? There was hypnosis there. You also unite ideas. And it became more intricate, and I don't know if the reason we ascribe Sabina's ideas to Jung are because he did plagiarism, or both him and actually Freud, because they were all in contact with each other, or because of something else, because Sabina was a known professional. Piaget was her patient. She was a known professional. She was, she was not something that did something secretly that we didn't hear. It was not one of these stories where you have like an assistant who does all the job and comes up with something that they find, and then the professor takes credit for that. It was not that case. She had her own reputation, her own individual stance in the field. So I don't know what happened there. And it was also something kind of interesting, the way she thought about having children with Freud. It was really mythical. She saw it as something mythical. And it would also relate to her being murdered in the Second World War, because she didn't believe that the Germans would be murderous. And there's a reason why, you know, people did not believe the Germans of the Second World War would be this cruel. We met the Germans in the First World War, and there was completely different. Those were completely different Germans. So it's a lot of stuff to stuff in, and I know that I won't be. I know energetically that I won't be able to do a good job of discernment there, because it brings the planets of illusion into my chart. In places where, you know, the home, or, you know, where my Rahu is Gemini. I don't remember where was the Neptune for Jung, and so it's a huge one. I don't know when and how will I do that, but that's something that I'm kind of thinking about. And I realized that I'm being called to talk about figures of the Second World War, because they help us understand scientific materialism, and that definitely goes up this video. Although maybe scientific materialism should be another video, I don't know. But hey, camera's still on. So scientific materialism, you know, we can say it began with Newton. We can also say it began with Da Vinci, because Da Vinci did observation. He did not do just channeling, as people did it in the academia back then. But then there was Newton, who did great, you know, what I talked about as Asperger's science, noticing patterns in things. And then, you know, if you talk about Einstein, and I'm having an energy cleanse with him tomorrow. I'm having a serious energy cleanse with the leaders of the war tomorrow, with the thinkers and the leaders of the Second World War, that I may or may not talk about. But before, if ever I do an episode on Einstein, I definitely want to cleanse energy to make sure that, you know, that the channel is clear. And the word God was present in his speech. He was more spiritual. I think his ninth house was Piscean. He was feeling into things. He talked about imagination a lot. This is very yin science. And while Feynman will already speak differently about the world. And we cannot deny the presence of the Second World War as something that took people away from spirituality, not just religion. Secularity begins with the Enlightenment, but of spirituality. Because even though for the Americans they won the war, but spirituality became something that's, you know, how can you speak about spirituality when there was a Second World War? How can you speak about spirituality from the vantage point of, you know, surviving Holocaust? But then there were also people like my grandfather who went to the synagogue and read Psalm every day. So I don't know how to treat that. But we do need to honor that one of the streams, one of the contributing factors to scientific materialism was actually a world war. Many things, yeah. And another thing about the yin-yang consciousness, if I, let's say, try to figure out how something works mathematically, or even when I give a reading, I look at the chart. So there are things that I cognitively know. Cognitively, what is the ascendant ruler, outer planets to inner planets contact, where the houses, the rulers, the signs, and so on and so forth, the temperature of the planets, what aspects do they create, the temperature of the aspects that they create, yin-yang perspectives, and there are things I cognitively know. But then comes a client, I begin to read the chart, and intuitively I'm drawn to speak about certain stuff. If I think about the episode I did on Feynman, I think I didn't even look at his ascendant the whole episode. Only after I did energy cleanse did I realize that his ascendant is in Virgo while mine is in Pisces, and his Rahu is where my Ketu is. So I have a perfect mirror. So stuff would come up intuitively. And so it's difficult to separate what do you know cognitively and what do you know intuitively. The only way to separate that would be for a person to not be able to channel or to not be able to do math. And we need that separation and isolation to understand the world from these different point of views and then reintegrate them together. That was the contribution of scientific materialism. And here I am, you know, spiritual person, all speaking about the spirit of matter and integrating things and channeling science. Okay, that's the name of this YouTube channel, is Channeling Science, as an experiment of unifying these things. And I'm saying that in honor of scientific materialism that allowed us to see the world from a different point of view. And a lot of these thoughts of, well, I don't know what it all means. I don't know if the universe cares about us or not. I don't know all these things, but I can find beauty in nature, and I can find beauty in mechanism, and I can find beauty in learning and explaining things, you know, Feynman. That's the post-Second World War thingy. It's also, you know, it's also a 9th house in Taurus. It's practical. But why would these people born in this time? Why were the planets arranged in this time? There we can find themes and patterns, also in terms of the higher perspective. It was a consciousness that allowed us to isolate a certain stream and certain ways of understanding the world and developing them, and do something good with that. Yeah, so that was a long episode, a chaotic episode, somewhat dark episode, somewhat light episode. I spoke about things that I didn't think I would speak, and I probably didn't speak about things that I thought I would speak. But I'll see you in the next Spirit of Matter episode. I don't know what will it be about just yet. I know I'm cooking up something with Rational Impact, and you can find him on Twitter. But it's cooking up, and you can check him out on Twitter, so shout out to Rational Impact. And yeah, I'm not going to say too much about it meanwhile. So I'll see you in my next video. Have a lovely time. Bye bye.